Hello everyone, my name is Kamal Kamran and I am a technical consultant at Informed Solutions. Today, I'm going to share some guidelines and best practices around reviewing code as is taken forward at Informed. We all know that code review is a vital aspect of producing good solutions, and high quality code review is paramount to high quality code. Cultivating these types of code reviews in teams consistently is going to result in a range of high quality solutions being delivered to your clients. Anyone and everyone who writes code oftentimes in a professional setting is going to be faced with conducting code reviews. As such, it's generally a good idea to encourage and develop this skill among members of your team. While there are numerous reasons why code review can be an important activity as part of the development process, here are a few of the key ones. It is a good way to spot check for errors. It's a good opportunity to flag potential optimizations. These can be automation processes, local development tools, or design patterns used in code, to name a few. Contextual analysis can be provided by developers more familiar to the solution, which can help strengthen the maintainability of the code. It can be an avenue for more experienced developers to share their experience regarding the specific tools, technologies, or methods being used. While not always, it can be a good opportunity for peer or mob programming sessions. It can also be a good point to verify whether the changes match the user requirements before code can be pushed up for testing. Informed, we have a diverse set of teams working on a wide range of projects, which can have their own motivations for their choice of the tools, technologies, and processes being used. As such, we've chosen to stray away from defining standards to adhere to and gone more towards defining guiding principles that each of the teams can take inspiration from and apply within their teams to grow a good quality code reviewing culture. These guidelines have been formed by taking a holistic view of the code reviewing process, taking into account the main motivations of a code review and how these might be expressed through action. Here are the guiding principles that we have formed. Oftentimes, in a code review, it's easy to get distracted with formatting issues, lack of proper test coverage, proper documentation, or language conventions, and so on. These sort of things take the focus away from what matters in a code review, which should be geared around the change that was developed and more around the human aspects of it. In other words, the things that cannot be automated. One of the things that cannot be very easily automated yet is the use of consistent patterns across the solution. This closely ties into the contextual analysis motivation that was highlighted earlier. It's good to follow the same patterns across the solution unless there's a justifiable need to stray away from this. A code review should be easy to follow and understand by the reviewers, as this allows them to conduct the review to a high quality standard. As discussed previously, a code review can be a good point to discuss any potential improvements to the solution, and for more experienced developers to share their knowledge and develop the skills of other developers in the area being worked on. These activities should be encouraged among developers involved in a code review as it leads to a healthier, more productive team and a high quality solution. A good code reviewing system does not allow unverified changes from making their way up in the release process. An example of this could be branch protections that prevent merging if a certain number of reviewers have not accepted the change being reviewed. A good code reviewing system also handles sensitive changes from making their way into the solution, like secrets, for example, through the use of automated credential scanning tools. Good to get an idea of who can take part in a code reviewing activity and get some discussions as to what this looks like in your team. A few guidelines to follow might be ideally reviewed by two people. You can set up a rotation in the team throughout the week to focus on reviewing code. It should be preferably someone who has more experience in the area or someone with more knowledge regarding the technologies involved. While not the default option, but it can be anyone in the team who is available and authorized to take the change forward. Timing can be a crucial factor when trying to produce high quality code reviews. Some things to consider when trying to conduct or author code reviews are, as a reviewer, it's good to tackle these early in the day, as any questions or comments you raise are going to be fresh in your mind when they are brought up for discussion again by the author. While not always possible, it's a good idea as a reviewer to not spend too much time on a code review, as this could lead to loss of concentration and interest, which ultimately will lead to a lower quality code review. As an author, it's also a good idea to try to keep reviews small as to get the best value of the reviewer from the code reviewing activity. As an author, Here are some guidelines to follow when you're raising a code review. It's a good idea to fill out the code review description with as much information as possible to help those reviewing the code to understand the change better. Ensure the review has a few related changes to keep the reviewer focused. A reference to the ticket number or a link to the ticket can be a good way to add more information to a review without making it too wordy. When you have raised a review, it's a good idea to tag your teammates in the review and signpost them in the relevant channels to make them aware. When the changes you make are small and not easily discernible, it's a good idea to highlight them with a comment to make it easier for reviewers to spot. Let's zoom into a code review and specifically look at how you can add a good description to support it. As mentioned before, it's a good idea to add either a reference to your ticket or a link to it, as it can be a good way to add more information to the code review without making it too wordy. Add any contextual information that might be related to the change. For example, motivation for the change. Or, if this is an iteration to a change, it's good to highlight this and maybe include a short sentence on the previously made changes. And so on. Links to any external resources that were used to help make that change. Most reviewing platforms allow you to tag your teammates in code reviews, so it's a good idea to capitalize on this and include them. A short sentence to describe the start and end of the change you've made, as this will allow them to better understand and follow the change through the review. One of the more controversial aspects of a code review is communication. We've gathered some guidelines around this as well to ensure our teams are building a healthy code reviewing culture. Both the reviewer and authors need to be empathetic when conducting and raising a code review, as both parties have taken time to make the change and ensure that it is of a good standard. Offer constructive feedback. Consider the skill level of the reviewer or author when commenting on the code. As a reviewer, if you find that you're making too many comments on the code review, it's a good idea to block some time in with the author of the review to ensure that both parties are on the same page. And this provides a good opportunity to gain better understanding of the change. When you feel as a reviewer that you're making more nitpick style comments, like formatting changes, test coverage, or code conventions, it might be a good idea to investigate any automation flows or local development tools and see if they can take away some of this burden from the code reviewing activity. Avoid demoralizing language. When making suggestions to improve certain aspects of code, it is good to include any links to documentation or an example when implementing the change that you've suggested. While not always possible, try to avoid the use of acronyms, as this can lead to misunderstandings, especially with new team members. Sometimes deadlocks can occur in a code review. These are due to a difference of opinion between reviewers or the author and the reviewers. When this happens, it's a good idea to get more senior or experienced members of the team involved, like a team lead or senior developer. Finally, let's talk about closing a code review. It's a good idea to ensure the following before closing your code review. At least one other team member has reviewed the code. It's important for this to be someone who is authorized to take the change forward. All blocking comments highlighted by reviewers have been resolved. Any non-blocking comments have also been discussed, and a way to make those changes has been outlined. All automated flows have completed and passed. That's all for this session. Thanks for watching, and hope you've learned something valuable when it comes to bolstering your code review process. If you have any thoughts around this, we'd love to hear them in the comments.